Hello, Gen Genies. Before we get started, Rich and I want to let you in on some exciting updates for our Patreon subscribers.
Patreon is a site where listeners can pledge a small monthly amount, either $5 or $10, to support the cost of bringing you your favorite podcast.
All patrons get early access to new CutOff Jeans episodes before they're released to the public.
And along with our undying gratitude, you'll also be able to join our special patron-only Facebook group.
But the most exciting new perk is exclusive access to essays I'm writing from my upcoming memoir. And you guys can help me be editors.
New Patreon supporters will also get a shout out on the podcast.
Rich and I enjoy bringing you the CutOff Jeans podcast and would mean so much if you would consider supporting our labor of love.
Just go to patreon.com/CutOff Jeans podcast.
Thank you all so much, my Gen Genies.
And now, on with the show.
Is your family tree a mystery? Are you fascinated by genealogy? Well, hip hip hooray, let's talk DNA with Julie.
The truth is in your genes.
In CutOff Jeans.
Welcome to CutOff Jeans, the podcast that helps you find your truth using nothing but DNA. I'm Julie Jackson, and I'm a genetic genealogist, henceforth known as a Gen Genie.
And I am Richard Castle, the co-host and producer of this podcast. How are you, Julie?
I'm fine, Richard. How are you?
I'm good. This is the end of the 4th season.
It's the end of the 4th season as we know it.
It's like the season finale. I wish we could have like a cliffhanger.
Yeah, you know what? Here's what I'll do. I'm gonna do a little bonus, everybody.
Oh.
So this week's story time would be a 2-parter. So and it still will be a 2-parter. So I will release the second half of it next week.
Oh, nice.
So as like a bonus thing.
Yeah. Oh, great. Maybe we should do a cliffhanger. Like at the end, you'll hear a gunshot. We'll have to decide like who shot Richard.
It's me in the shower.
Yeah.
Wait, wasn't somebody in the shower? Oh no, that was Patrick.
Patrick Ewing.
Aquaman.
Wasn't it Patrick?
No, Patrick Ewing is a basketball player. We are such white indoor
Bobby
kids.
Ewing, played
Bobby Ewing.
by Patrick.
No, but Patrick Duffy.
Oh my God, that is hysterical.
Oh Lord.
See how these things get jumbled when you get older? You're like, I'm like Patrick Ewing. No.
Just. Yeah, on the regs, really.
Our listeners are probably like hitting their foreheads right now, like those idiots.
Yeah, they're screaming at their phone.
Either that or they're young and they don't know what Dallas. We're talking about the TV show Dallas from like the 80s.
Oh yeah. Was that the song?
Yeah, I think you've lowered the key quite a bit.
Well, I'm old. What do you want? I love that you know the original key.
I couldn't like pick it up, but I know it wasn't that low because it was certainly, wasn't it like a trumpet or something?
I don't know. I never watched it.
You know, speaking of singing, I have to say I saw your TikTok where you sang along with somebody, Hallelujah,
yes.
And it was beautiful, Julie. I mean, I know you have a beautiful voice, but I don't know that all our listeners know that, you know, in your previous career and whenever you get the chance, you sing and you have the most glorious instrument. And I just loved hearing you sing again.
Friend. You know what? It felt so good. And I realized I was just doing it for fun at first because I realized on TikTok, we're TikTok centric now. On TikTok, people do duets.
Yes.
And they'll sing like a harmony and have you sing the melody or vice versa.
Yes.
And to everything. That's another rabbit hole I've been down. And I thought, I want to try this. And I did mean, but I wasn't planning on posting it.
Right.
But it felt so good. And the endorphins, I forget the endorphins that I get from singing.
Yeah.
And I wish just because of that, I sang more.
Yeah, honestly, because before COVID, we used to record together here, and then and you would come and sing some of my songs here in the studio, and I remember you getting those endorphins. So
yes, I do too. That was the first time it really hit me where I would do like every take it would get better, not because practice makes perfect, but just because I was feeling it more.
Yes.
And it was, So I don't know. I've been, there's a bunch of musical theater ones that I may just do because you know what? I can do what I want.
That's right.
So
that's right. And I need to get some stuff to get you in here and sing some more too, because I just miss your voice. And it reminded me when I heard that I need to, write something for you.
Oh, please write something for me. Write something else. Write me a adoptee NPE song. That would be an epic. That would be like that would be an entire show.
Well, I told you that there was I think I sent it to you, that they were some theater company was looking for adoption monologues, right?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
And of course, I didn't get on that at all because ADD, guys.
And I thought, my gosh, you could probably adapt just one of the blogs that you wrote,
I could. I wonder if there's still. Maybe I should go back and look into that.
I saw it again recently, and I'll try to find it and send it to you. But yeah, there was some theater company that was looking for those kind of things. So I thought, oh, that's right up your alley. I don't remember whether it meant they wanted something just written or whether they wanted it performed. But
interesting.
Yeah, but you could do either, because you're so multifaceted.
Yeah, it would be weird hearing somebody else tell my story.
Yeah, but they would be playing the role.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
Yeah.
But it would be interesting to hear somebody else's take on it.
For sure.
Too,
and you would get a different perspective probably hearing somebody saying those words and making different choices than you would, So.
Yeah. Ooh, that's kind of exciting. All right. Anyway, should we get into this?
Why not?
Oh, wait. I want to say before, so we don't forget at the end, since this is the last episode of season 4, another way that you can support us is by going to the Apple Podcasts app and leave a review.
Yes, please.
Because that is incredibly helpful to us to get us out there. And so it's really easy. Just leave a really quick review. 5 stars, please. And because we have quite a few really great reviews, but we haven't had one in a while, and I think people forget about it. So if I could ask that favor of you guys.
Basically, there's 3 ways that you can support us: by listening to us, by leaving a review on the Apple Podcast app, or by supporting us at patreon.com.
Okay, I wanted to start with this really wonderful trenches story.
Great.
That happened yesterday. And it was just, you know what? It really made my day. I woke up yesterday just feeling kind of which is neither here nor there. We do that. But I got a phone call from a biological father. My client, I think I solved it like a month ago, and had gotten down to one of these 2 brothers, and we wrote this guy a letter because my client had somehow found out that he had been in the place where her mother had been. That seemed to match the story better. So we wrote him a letter saying we think it's one of the 2 of you, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that must be me."
Okay.
Which right away, that's refreshing. Yeah. So she told me, everything is great. He seems to be really open to this. Thank you so much. Case closed. One of those easy peasy lemon squeezy. So I get this phone call yesterday, and it's the father, and he says, "I don't know if you remember me. My name is blah blah, and you so-and-so is apparently my daughter." And I said, "Oh yes, I do remember you." And he said, "Well, so I don't tell her, or I haven't told her, but, my wife and people around me said that I should get a DNA test just to make sure." Okay. And I was like, sure, why not? And while he's been sitting there waiting for the results to come back, he's starting to get freaked out.
Oh, no.
That he's scared that the results will come back, that he's not her father, and they've already bonded.
Oh, no. Wow.
And I said, "Well, so do you think, could it be your brother?" And he's like, "Oh, no." And I said, "Well, was he?" He's like, "He couldn't. I knew her mother." I'm like, "Oh, wait, so you knew her mother?" He said, "Yeah, and I was with her."
Well, then why was he worried? Oh, because perhaps should have been somebody else, right? Like around the same time.
Well, perhaps. Well, what he didn't realize, or what he didn't put together, and this happens a lot, is that, and I put it this way, I said, "Look, we did not know your name. All we knew was the story. The only way I got down to you or your brother was DNA. What are the chances of me guessing it was you?
Yeah.
And you happen to have known her mother. And I mean, the DNA was quite clear. It's definitely, and so he was very relieved. And, but I did tell him that if it wasn't him, I would send him $100. So in this case, there were close enough relatives on his mother's side. And I realized during the case that he and his brother were raised by a stepfather. So the name that they grew up with was not in the DNA.
Okay.
So I couldn't confirm 100%, which is why we wrote to them and said, we think it's one of the two of you. Because it was very clear that on the one side. So after she talked to him for a while, that he gave her the name of his biological father, and I went in and I found that name. So it was correct. So after the fact, after we contacted him, then we got the name of his biological father, and it fit. I found the matches in the DNA for that. So it's him. It's definitely
it's
him.
Still really sweet that he was concerned that, maybe it isn't me because we've already bonded, and that's really,
It was so lovely. It was the best feeling because I kind of am on eggshells a lot of the time. When I love what I do, but the most anxious part is the contacting and, and waiting for people to respond, and clients that think they're not responding fast enough. And, that's the hardest part about it, is because I can't control how people react. And so I'm doing my best to really prep my clients now for various and sundry reactions, because we don't know what they're going to do.
Right.
And we don't know what they've been through. And we really have to prepare ourselves for any outcome.
Right. And I don't suppose it would have been any comfort if you'd shared your story and how you went and flew to Australia to meet the father who wasn't your father.
I'm trying to think. Did I say that to him? Did I tell him? I do share it with a lot of clients. I don't with
that you brought home
their...
family pictures that he gave you, right?
Oh, yes. No, I know more about this complete stranger's family than any of them do. Now, I still have this amazing tree with, the Solomon the goat stealer and all of this that's still there, and nobody in that family cares.
It probably wouldn't have put him at ease if you had told your client that story.
Yeah, probably not. Well, but that's why I think it was actually a really good idea that he tested them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
In his case, now I have had biological mothers say, "Well, how do we know for sure?" And I'm like, "Did you have a baby on that day?" And they're like, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, "What are the chances the DNA points to you, but that's not the baby you gave away?"
Oh my God.
That has happened more than once.
Denial is very strong. The
Yes.
Power of denial, for sure. Yeah.
It's also a river in Egypt. FYI.
There was a queen of denial, as I remember.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good story. I'm really happy that there are people out there that are, that kind, and I don't know. That's a really sweet story.
It was really sweet. It made my day yesterday at what started out.
Because there's so many what does this child want from me? Or I hope it's not me. I hope I'm not the
a lot. I have gosh. Recently I've contacted two biological mothers, and both of them are like, yeah, this is a lot. Give me a chance to get back to them. I just need to process. I'm like, of course, I totally understand. Thank you for responding to me.
Yes.
And so that we know that you got it, and that now you're going to work through your stuff, but we've made a connection.
Right.
Twice recently, things happen in pairs. The clients call me back and they're like, I still haven't heard from her. It's been a week. And that's when I have to say, at this point, I can't force anybody to talk to anybody.
Right.
But you really, and that's when I tell them to read The Girls Who Went Away. And because a lot of people still in their head think that, well, because they've been out of their life, that there's no trauma
Yeah.
from that. Like they completely forgot about it, which some people do, obviously.
Yeah. Well,
But yeah, it's happened. I've had an initial response from mothers in the past that seemed eager and then changed their mind.
sure. Well, whatever they're working through, right?
Whatever they're working through, and I can't be the arbiter of that. It's just
because you don't know their life and what they're going through and have gone through. Well, no, but it's true.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's
yeah.
You're hired to find them, and that's really all you can do, and make the introduction or whatever, give the information.
Right. And you know what? The thing is, I think, and I not to pat my own back here, but I will. I think the reason I'm good at what I do is because I have that extra level of understanding as an adoptee and having had so much experience with biological families.
Right.
Because I'm really in the middle of it. And even like a lot of people that do this are not adoptees or NPEs and have never experienced what it's like to be an adoptee.
Yeah.
That even people in my company, and they're great at what they do, but I think I give an extra level to my clients because of that.
No, I agree. And to flip that around, how has the job that you've been doing and meeting so many different people and hearing their stories, how has that affected the way you look at your own adoption and your own situation?
Oh, interesting. It has brought a lot to the, yeah, it has. It has. It's brought a lot to the forefront. And I will say, because of the nature of what I do, it's kind of my identity now. I'm an adoptee and I'm an adoptee advocate, but I'm also an advocate for first moms because I've witnessed and I know what they've been through and I know the history of the adoption industry. And I'm for adoption reform. It's like a whole new chapter.
Sure.
We were talking before about the, singing, and I very much miss the singing and the performing. But this is literally, a 180-degree turn, and I'm a different person, and with different experiences now, and a different goals in life.
Right.
I suppose.
Yeah.
I suppose. But I think my level of empathy for biological mothers has absolutely grown.
Sure, because you didn't see that side of it growing up, like as an adoptee.
I only knew, and I only knew even after I found my mother, I only knew her experience.
And we've heard enough stories of the interviews that you've done with birth mothers that so
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, it's opened my eyes to something I didn't know much about. So
right, our story time today is going to hit on that a lot or touch on that a lot today.
Nice. Well, let's take a break and we'll come back and do our second segment, and then we'll go to story time after that.
All righty then.
Okay. If you're enjoying our podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review, or consider supporting us on our Patreon page, patreon.com/CutOff Jeans Podcast. Now back to Julie and me.
Okay, here is a fun story that gave me a chuckle. Do you have any tattoos?
None.
I didn't think so. I have one in my nether regions that I got after I had my daughter. It's a lily.
Oh, that's sweet.
Because I've always liked tattoos, but I didn't want to get one until it was something that I knew it was going to be very important to me for my entire life.
I agree with you. And I think they're really cool. They can be really cool. I've seen some great ones. I've seen some ugly ones. But I'm also somebody that changes my mind a lot. And so I feel like if I got something and then it was for anything permanent, I'm afraid of.
Well, my daughter just got her fourth.
Well, there you go. But I think the younger generation, they're more apt to get body art.
Yes. And they're all really pretty and they're all meaningful. So I'm fine with it. All right. So actor Penn was on the Kelly Clarkson show the other day, and he got a tattoo. So he was on the TV show Finding Your Roots, and he was really excited about it because he was sure that he was going to be like a third Scottish, and he could finally have a family crest. His South Indian, by the way, South Asian. Excuse me, South Asian. But it turns out that he's 99.9% South Asian. And he's like, great, that's super disappointing. So the show's crew showed him a map with the number R1A-M147, which is a maternal haplogroup he shares with millions of other people. I guess it's the South Asian maternal haplogroup. It's basically your DNA. And he was like, that's what's going to be my first tattoo because it's science. Oh. So he went and he got that tattooed. And so after the show and after he got his tattoo, he decided he wanted to dig a little deeper. So he got his own DNA testing kit. And the results came back. And he was so disturbed because that website told him that his haplogroup was R1A-M417 as opposed to 147. So he got the wrong haplogroup.
Well, see, this proves my point as to why you don't get something permanent. Because,
but he was like, the whole argument was like, it's science. It'll never change. But it was a human mistake. There's a human mistakes in science too.
Oh my gosh.
And speaking of that, how's this for a segue? Speaking of human mistakes, this is a bad one. So, and this just happened in our area, in Southern California. A California couple using IVF gave birth to a stranger's baby. So this couple, the wife is Daphne Cardinal. She delivered a perfectly healthy baby girl on September 24th, 2019, and she was instantly in love. Her husband, though, he had doubts from the first second because the hair was jet black and her complexion was so different. He just couldn't see any family resemblance, which is weird. With babies, it's like babies usually don't look like one of the adults, even though everybody was sure that my daughter was a spitting image of my husband when she was born.
No, I know. My niece and her husband both have dark hair, and their first child came out blonde hair, blue-eyed, and neither of them have blue eyes or blonde hair. So,
can two brown-eyed people have a blue-eyed baby? Have we opened a can of worms here?
I'm not going to go there. Because
that is something that I should know. Actually, the traditional rules that we always lived by are not, they have been altered, have changed. So, okay. So, they already had a 5-year-old daughter and she was smitten, with being a big sister but doubts nagged the husband, Alexander. So after a couple of months, Daphne bought DNA kits to put her husband's doubts to rest. But they were shattered to discover that their baby wasn't genetically theirs at all.
Oh my gosh.
Either of theirs. And then a new terror that her baby had been taken away seized them. They thought that maybe there was a switch at the hospital.
Sure.
So they contacted the California Center for Reproductive Health, where they did the IVF and eventually learned that 2 embryos had somehow been switched. Daphne Cardinal had carried and given birth to a baby from complete strangers, and strangers had given birth to, and were raising their biological daughter.
Oh my God.
This hurts my stomach to think about. It's so painful.
And you've got to figure there have to be stringent safeguards against this kind of thing, right? Because it's so important.
Oh, yes, and there are. And so we'll get to that in a second. She said, my memories of childbirth will always be tainted by the sick reality that our biological child was given to someone else, and the baby that I fought to bring into this world was not mine to keep. Ugh.
Oh my God.
The daughter we raised and bonded with was gone after months of love and affection. There is no way to describe the pain we've been through. It's inconceivable.
So they basically traded babies?
So what happened was them and the other couple eventually returned biological babies to each other and have become a very 21st century extended family themselves. Things did not work out quite so neatly for families ensnared in, there was a UCI scandal a few years ago, UCI IVF scandal where women who had not been able to carry their own children, I guess that their embryos were being stored and they ended up putting the stored embryos and other women who carried them to term and raised them as their own. Their embryos. They found out who those babies were and like would go to playgrounds to like watch them.
Oh
because
my God.
They weren't theirs, but they had this connection to a baby that they desperately wanted. It's horrible.
This sounds like a 21st century horror story, right?
Yeah. Ugh. And it keeps going back to big business. This all happens because of big business.
Well, I mean, did they find out how this mistake happened?
Yeah. Though they were told that the fertility operation was all in-house, it turns out that CCRH outsourced the handling of the embryos to In Vitro Tech Labs and its parent company, Beverly Sunset Surgical Associates. Both were owned by MOR and had a sordid history of allegedly mixing up mislabeled. So they sent it out for some kind of testing to an external facility.
Right.
And that's where they got mixed up, apparently.
So awful.
Obviously, this is we're only looking at one side of this story as far as the couples go.
Right.
This other couple has been through the same thing, but they're not mentioned. I think they're going to... This is focusing on the Cardinals because they're suing, and this other couple is going to sue. I think they're going to announce a lawsuit next week, but they're going to do it anonymously.
Oh, it should never have happened.
It should never have happened. And I think I've referenced this before, that happened, 2 babies switched to birth this was years ago, and there was a TV movie about it, and then there was a follow-up 2020 where... because they were fighting over there were 2 baby girls that were switched in the hospital, and one of them was raised. So they were raised with different families, but one of them got cancer and died. But the parents that raised her were actually the parents of this other baby, and they learned that this other baby was still alive, and so they had the battle over this girl. And it did not turn out well. God, it's just so awful. And worse of all, and I talk about this as far as adoptees, we are the ones with the least say in any of this, obviously, when we're babies, but also even as adults where most of the trauma happened to us. And we're not allowed to talk about that because it makes others uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so they would rather just pretend, it was okay, no big deal, right? And it is a big deal.
Yeah.
And this is a big deal too. This is a huge deal.
And it will be a big deal to these kids who were born and switched before they were. Yeah.
Right. So, they're going to be. I mean, this is going to be who they are.
Right, because they, like this little girl that she fell in love with, also bonded with her mom and dad and
the big sister.
And the big sister. And it's like,
you
know, you can't even quantify it now because they're still babies. She's still a baby, but yeah, later on.
Oh, the trauma though. Yes, absolutely. I've talked about, I was in the baby's home for 2 months.
Right.
And the trauma that I think whatever I experienced or didn't experience there has become what my life is about.
Right.
I think that has been the arbiter for everything, every kind of trauma or trauma reaction that I've had. So much happens in those first few months. So much.
Right.
Anyway, so I am just heartsick for these people.
And heads will roll somewhere.
Oh, yes. And checks will be written.
Yeah. I hope they put some aside for the therapy for those kids when they grow up, you know?
Absolutely. Anyway, should we take a break?
Let's do that.
All right.
Thank you for listening to Cut Off Jeans with Julie Dixon-Jackson and Richard Castle. You can support us by going to patreon.com/Cut Off Jeans podcast. Now, back to the program.
Okay, it is story time, and it's a timely story time, considering we've talked so much today about biological mothers.
Yes.
So this, I found this gentleman. He's on a lot of the adoptee pages. And this is not DNA related, but I think still very relevant. His experience is still very relevant. And a lot of the times we just want to talk about adoptee issues. So Daryn Watson is an adoptee and also an adoption reunion coach. And so this first part of our conversation just talks about his experience and, what he experienced and why he became a reunion coach, really.
Great. Let's listen in.
Okay, let's. Hey, everybody. I have on the line Daryn Watson, who is an adoption reunion coach as well as an adoptee himself. Thanks for talking to me today, Daryn.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to talking with you today.
I feel like this is a really timely conversation to have since I've been dealing so much with biological mothers lately, and as well as adoptees who are having difficulty navigating the whole reunion extravaganza, if you will. So it's nice to get some insight from somebody who has been there, done that, and also has some experience in the psychological ramifications of adoption and adoption reunion. So can you tell us a little bit about your own background as an adoptee?
I was born in a small town called Hanna, Alberta. It's a farming town southeast of Calgary. And Hanna is known for Lanny McDonald, who is NHL Hall of Fame hockey player. And also that's where Nickelback, the band, is from.
Ooh.
I don't know if that's a good or bad thing for some people, but
I don't know either, frankly.
So, and I've never met either Lanny McDonald or the band Nickelback, but my birth mother did know Lanny McDonald's mother.
Wow. Okay.
I was born on July 9th, 1970, and I was relinquished at birth. My birth mother was put under anesthesia, and she never held me, which was a very common practice back then.
Yeah.
And she was barely 16 years old when I was born, and I was in the hospital for 3 weeks, and then I was taken to foster care. And
do you know why you were in the hospital for 3 weeks?
I don't. I did meet a woman who was a nurse at the hospital when I was born, and when I had my first reunion, I actually met the nurse. Her name was Penny, and so I got to meet her. And she told my birth mother after 3 weeks I was taken to foster care. Okay. And I was in foster care for just over 7 months.
Oh, wow.
And my adoptive parents lived in a town in northern Alberta called Peace River. And my adoptive mom owned a flower shop, and they called her on a Thursday. The Alberta government called her and said, "We have a boy for you. You need to come pick him up tomorrow on Friday." And it's 300 miles distance from Peace River to Edmonton, mm-hmm. which is the capital of Alberta. And my mom, it was right before Valentine's Day, which was the busiest day for her flower shop of the year.
Oh,
so
wow, I bet, yeah.
She said, "Well, I can't come until Monday because of Valentine's Day and my business having a flower shop." So normally back then, the adopted parents would not get that child. That child would be passed to the next family.
Oh, okay.
But they agreed to keep me in foster care throughout the weekend. So that Monday, my parents came to Edmonton and picked me up at the offices for the Alberta Government Social Services. Okay. And that was located beside a shopping center. And when they picked me up, my clothes were dirty, my shoes were too small, and I was kind of neglected. And so my mom had my dad go buy some clothing at the department store next door, and then my parents took me back home to Peace River. And
side note, do you know why you were in foster care for so long?
I don't. I do know, I did find out later on from my paperwork who the foster family was, and I was abused during foster care. I know that because of who the foster father was. And also after the first year after my parents picked me up, every time my adopted dad would pick me up, I would cry, and no one could figure out why.
Oh, yeah.
So just the male energy was a reminder of the traumatic experience I had with a foster father.
Huh. Is that normal in Canada, I guess, for babies to be in foster care longer than average? Do you think?
I don't know for sure.
Okay.
I don't really know why I was in foster care for that long, but it can be for a few weeks or months from my understanding.
Yeah, I think it's usually, my understanding is that it's usually when you're somewhere for that long, it's because they're trying to possibly reunite you with your biological family. Did that come into play at all?
No.
Huh.
No.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I do know my birth mother did tell me at one point in our reunion that her brother had talked about adopting me, but she didn't want to go that route.
Okay.
So I lived with my parents and my sister, who was not adopted, but she was about 7.5 months older than me. I did have very good adopted parents. They tried to treat my sister and I equally. She and I didn't get along terribly well. I think after I was brought into the family, my sister didn't like that because I took away a lot of the attention she had been getting.
Okay, so when did you decide you wanted to find your biological family?
Backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
My mama worked for the RCMP Mounties in Peace River, and during the '88 Winter Olympics in Calgary, she volunteered to go work there. And after she came back, she said, "Well, we're moving to Edmonton," because she was just tired of living in a small town.
Mm-hmm.
And so a few months later, we moved to Edmonton, and about a year and a half later, in May of 1990, they moved to Austin, Texas. My parents did.
Mm-hmm.
And when before they left, my mom told me, "If you want to search, we'll help you." And I was only 19 at the time, and I was really in no position to be able to search.
Sure.
And so when I moved to Austin in 1991, and then when I turned 24 in 1994, my mom gave me a copy of Betty Jean Lifton's book, Journey of the Adopted Self.
Yeah, great book.
And I looked at it, and my mom wrote inside the inside cover. And even with that support, I was just too scared to do anything. And I closed the book. I didn't even read it until I turned 25.
Uh-huh. Can I just say, just another side note, I love your mom. That's amazing that she did that for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She understood that I had challenges and struggles with being adopted, and
smart woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good for her. Thanks, Mom.
Thank you. So when I turned 25 the next year, I started reading Betty Jean Lifton's book, and I identified with so many things in the book. Yeah. So I just decided I need to start searching. Mm-hmm. And I wrote the Government of Alberta's vital statistics in August of 1995, and I got a letter back a few weeks later. It was October 2nd, and it was a large manila envelope. It was thin, but I picked it up. It was a Monday night, and I went to a local adoption support group called Adoption Knowledge Affiliates. and they had a search meeting that night. And so there were a couple of founding members of AKA that were there, and also a search angel. And when I got there, I talked to them, and I opened up the envelope and I stared at my birth name. I knew my first given name at birth was Lyle. I didn't know the rest of the name. Mm-hmm. And I just kept staring at it. And the search angel, her name was Dee. She offered to put my information out on some search sites on the internet. And I agreed to it. I was very skeptical. I didn't think it would help that much, but I didn't know much about the internet back then. Mm-hmm. And so later that weekend, I got a call from one of the founders. Her name was Nancy, and she said a gentleman in Manitoba, Winnipeg, Manitoba, had gotten my information, and he left a message from my birth mother. Oh. And so I was really kind of in shock. Yeah. Because the day before I had called information, and I got 3 phone numbers of the same maternal name in Hannah, but I was too scared to phone.
Sure.
On my own, and I prayed and journaled about it, and the message was to wait. Mm. And I didn't know how long, but I said, okay, I'm going to wait. And then Monday night came around, and the search angel in Winnipeg, his name is Roy Kading, he called me and said, I left a message for your birth mother. I'm waiting to hear back from her, but I can't give you her information.
Okay.
Until he talked to her directly, and sure. he said, don't get your hopes up.
Ooh, yeah. That was and, that's always a smart thing to say, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I called my therapist and talked to her for a bit. She was also an adoptee, I believe. So after I got off the phone with her, I made dinner, and I was going to go to bed early that night. And the phone rang at 9:00 locally here, and I picked up the phone, and a woman said, hello, Daryn, this is your real mother. And it was my birth mother.
Wow.
And I just started freaking out. I said, oh my God, and over again. And I started crying, and she did too. And her voice sounded familiar to me.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
In some way. And we talked for an hour and a half. She told me who my birth father was. She told me the circumstances of what happened as to why I was relinquished for adoption. And so we had a really good conversation. We exchanged contact information, addresses, and we agreed to stay in touch. And I was just floored.
Yeah. So what was the story? Who was the person that had seen, I guess, your information that knew to reach out to her?
It was Roy Kading. He's an adoptee in Winnipeg. He's retired, and he called and left a message for one of my cousins, and he said, I'm looking for the youngest of 3 sisters. I did get identifying information, but it's not an actual birth certificate.
Okay.
But he left a message, and it was Thanksgiving weekend in Canada at that time. So when they came back to Hannah from another town where her husband's family was, and her niece was telling her, there's a guy named Roy looking for you, and he left this phone number, and she couldn't figure out why Roy was calling. And so on the way back to where they lived, it was a 2-hour drive, I think, and she said, oh my God, I know what it's my son. And my their youngest son, my other brother, was driving at the time, and he didn't know about me. So my birth mother and had to tell him, and then when they got back home, she called, and we spoke for the first time.
So that was a good first connect, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me how things evolved from there. Okay, thank you, Daryn, for the first part of that. As you know, this is the end of season 4, but I am going to, as a bonus, release the second half of this next week.
Nice. And then we will be back with our 5th season in early December.
Yay!
After Thanksgiving.
Yes.
I'd like to wish all of our listeners a happy Thanksgiving if that is what you celebrate. And if you don't, enjoy the next few weeks anyway.
It's the holiday season.
It is. I am Richard Castle, and you can go to my website, richardcastle.com, or you can follow me on the Twitter or on Instagram at Castle Songs.
I'm Julie Dixon Jackson. You can find me on the Twitter at JoolsJackson. Find the podcast on the Twitter at CutOff Jeans Pod. Find me and the podcast on TikTok at Jules Jackson Gengini. That's fun. There's also an Instagram page and there's a Facebook page. Also, if you would like to send me an email, if you would like help with your search, I am accepting clients right now. Contact me at Jules Jackson with 2 O's at cutoffjeans.com.
And I think to hold off everybody for the next 3 weeks or whatever until our next podcast, Julie, you need to tell them where to find their truth in the meantime.
The truth is in your jeans.